Hello, everyone. Welcome to our channel. I'm Kate.
And I'm Stephanie.
And together we're Three Heads. Today we're talking about how to avoid giving homework. It may seem like an odd time of year if you're watching this as it's published. It's just gone the beginning of May. But sometimes it's good to plant this seed and watch it germinate over the summer rather than trying to make this important decision and rather significant change right before the start of a new school year. If you're joining us from our podcast, Answers May Vary, thank you so much. We're glad you want to hear some practical strategies about implementing this. If you're joining us from a YouTube or Google search, welcome. We hope that you find this interesting and you might consider listening to the podcast so you hear the more philosophical, theoretical approach and why we decided to implement this change in our classroom. So let's go ahead and get started talking some strategies about implementing this in your classroom.
So one strategy that we used was having weekly assignments. First of all, just work in general would be due at the end of the week, a lot of times to kind of let students work at their own pace. But we also put things like grammar, kind of the business activities more as participation assignments that would let students complete them. They didn't necessarily need to be scored and graded.
Right. Or at least not by us. These are often assignments that are completed online. Sometimes they were assignments we created. Sometimes they were just a matter of completion, where maybe you were going to give them points based on their level of proficiency. Maybe it was going to be flat points. What we use the participation grades for are things that they're important to be done because they build up your skills or lead to something larger, but it's not worth our time to be grading those assignments. So it's a lower percentage in our categories, but it's something that if a student didn't do those activities all semester long, it would have a negative impact on their grade, but it's not necessarily a make or break.
And talking about it in context of a no homework kind of model, it's something we would do the first 15 minutes or so of class, which would give us time to check in with students and start to kind of connect and do housekeeping kinds of things. But it also was an opportunity for students who would finish their work early could go back to working on these weekly assignments.
For sure. It's nice. We sort of turned these assignments into what would traditionally be called like a bell ringer assignment. We found that our students just responded really positively to a sort of, I don't want to say regimented, but a very structured routine. And so it was nice to have that structure at the beginning of each class period. It was productive. It was something that they were going to be held accountable for. But again, not going to destroy anybody's grade. And in terms of pandemic or students being in and out of the classroom, it was really nice. It was something easy for students to work on at home if they were quarantined or if they were out of the classroom for an extended period of time.
And we would recommend which activity to work on which day, because some students need to be told explicitly what to do. But there are some students who I think just appreciated the chance to choose from a menu rather than having a specific assignment to work on.
Yeah, for sure. We always said, if you wanted to keep on schedule or if you want to stay with me, then today you're working on X. But then there are always students who are like, I want to do my typing first. Or I want to do my grammar first. Or I want to do first chapter Friday on Monday. You do you, as long as it all gets done.
So our next one, because obviously in an English class, you get rid of homework. Well, reading is usually the homework. How are you going to change things? And so one thing that we started doing, well, there's kind of two pieces to this, is we started doing reading where we would record the audio for students to listen to, of course, put out through an LMS so that it's not illegally out on the web. But we would include the audio for students to play, and then we would embed the questions in the text. The reason that we started doing this, one, the embedded questions really help students to work through the passage kind of to focus their attention on things.
Mm-hmm.
But also what it would do is it would allow us to guide them through the assignment without physically having to do it, so that would free us up to go around and answer questions, check in with students, give feedback, that sort of thing. Because traditionally, when we had done reading in class, it would be us playing the audio and pausing it to talk or to go through a question, where this allowed students to work at their own pace, but still have the support that we would have provided.
Yeah. And I think it's really helpful because it allows those students who want to work a little bit more quickly to work more quickly. It allows, like Stephanie said, those students who need support and help to get that support and help. And everybody's sort of on their own program. So nobody is really like checking in on other people's business. So students tend to be more willing to ask questions because it's not like the whole class is on one question. We also noticed we started the beginning of our year this year with doing the no homework. But then at the beginning of second semester, we were working on Romeo and Juliet, and we had to do some reading outside of class. And the instances of students not doing their own work, whether you want to call that cheating or collaboration, skyrocketed.
Yeah.
And we had far more students who were getting good grades on assignments and had no idea what was going on.
And they read a whole act of Romeo and Juliet in 7 minutes and got a perfect score.
Yeah. So you'll really, in our experience, you'll really see an increase in students doing their own work. It's just not practical for them to be doing cheating in the way that they do when they're working outside of class. So another thing.
And if you have a class that's really struggling with that, you can always use a program that locks those assignments during evening hours. The more you can avoid that is probably the best, just for students to be able to complete it. But there's definitely ways you can kind of play with it as students are doing or not doing their own work. To the extent you can control that anyway.
Absolutely. Do the best you can.
We used a really kind of a similar approach for writing, because historically in the past, we would have to provide like a lecture and then guide students through the process, which of course makes it hard to provide one-on-one feedback. And so we started providing really structured writing assignments where it would carefully explain to students, here's what you need to be saying in each paragraph. Here's the like formula we'd like you to follow. And then we would record ourselves in a screencast, like walking them through it, so that if a student benefited from being able, I think they were pretty straightforward without the screencast, but it allowed a student to kind of pause and complete it with a teacher, again, freeing us up to go around and provide one-on-one support to students who need it. Because especially for writing, reading can have its challenges, but writing, you've got a kid who's been stuck on sentence 1 for like 3 days, and then another kid who's been just sitting there waiting for you. So
I know for myself, when I was teaching writing and we were doing it in person, live instruction, there's the person who has moved ahead, and I'm not really upset that they've moved ahead, but I haven't explained so they have questions. And then I have the person who is struggling with like even opening the document or whatever. You have people at all different places, and that would become a more stressful circumstance for me. And so I would feel like I wasn't really answering anybody's questions. I know you're ready to move on, but I'm not ready to explain that yet. And I know that you need more help, but I need to move the rest of the class forward. And it becomes a little bit more sort of like frenetic for you. And when you have that screencast, great, you're ready to move on. Listen to the screencast. Let me know if you have any questions. If you're doing a good job on your screencast, which if you're interested in talking about how we put together our screencasts, we'd be happy. Drop us a comment and let us know. Then it just works so much more smoothly, and you're really able to give that individualized help to those students who need it. And those students who are just sort of trucking along are doing fine, and they are able to move at their own pace.
Yeah. it really becomes more of a workshop time. So instead of it being a lecture or guided discussion, it really, in an English class, becomes this workshop opportunity for them to work while I'm there to support them. And I think once students got used to it, it worked really well.
Yes.
This is kind of a sub bullet point to what we just were talking about, but we, in addition to the screencast for a reading assignment, a writing assignment, if there was something we needed to lecture on, that would go into a screencast as well. Sometimes in our honors courses, trying to manage discussion got interesting once we decided to change this model. And we'll talk about one of our other approaches in a second, but it was a way for us to we could look at all the student input and then we'd make a screencast responding to that. And so it was a way to still give them that feedback while still adjusting the way we run the class.
Yeah, I would say this screencast element is a really important part of being able to transition to a class that avoids giving homework. I'm not going to say never gives homework because that's not always possible. You can't make that promise to yourself or to your students. But that screencast element of it is really important because that's providing students with the sort of instruction that they need. It's doing what you would have done live. It's doing that for them to access when they are ready. And lots of your students are going to want to say, oh, I'm not going to listen to the screencast. I'm just going to read the directions. That's fine because sometimes a student can read the directions and then get started. If, however, when you check in with that student, you see they're not doing something correctly, or that student answers or asks a question that you answered in your screencast, then you just automatically direct them to the screencast. If you have questions after that, come to me. So it avoids that unnecessary repetition
answering the same question 15 times.
Exactly.
I think you could be wondering, after hearing that, you might be wondering, oh my gosh, but doesn't that double the amount of time? Because now they have to watch a screencast, now they have to do the work. And it doesn't. If it was a screencast that was primarily a lecture, we would make that the assignment, whether we would use something like Edpuzzle to push it out to force them to pay attention, or it would just be, we would give them some time to go through it. More often than not, though, it really was us walking them through the assignment with the idea that they would be doing the work as they listen. So some students need a little training on that. It was always weird to me how many students wanted to just watch the whole screencast and then do the work. But the idea is not that you're now adding, you have to watch a lecture and you have to do your work. It's meant to be kind of together, that you have me guiding you all period, but not me physically, so that I can physically be going around to help you.
So you, in your screencast, it's just like what you would do in class, where you would explain something and then you'd pause for them to do it. You do the same thing. You pause, except you say, pause your video when you're done, then resume it. And lots of times students will, at the beginning, just like in person in class, a student will have listened to a minute of your directions and be like, oh, I got it. And then they get started working, where another student is like, I need to listen to more of this and then get it started. But it's a matter of, again, conditioning them to, okay, when I say pause, if you haven't completed the step or you haven't answered the question or whatever it is that prompted you to tell them to pause the video, you need to do that. And it's easy to tell whether it's in person or digitally. If a student is just watching the screencast, it's like, hey, no, you need to stop and you need to complete the activity. Otherwise, you are doubling the amount of time you're going to have to work on something. And once you get students to realize they're doubling their amount of time, either they're fully committed to that, in which case they don't mind, more power to you, or they're going to say, oh, okay, I don't want to spend double. Thank you. I'm going to get started on
this. And the other
this.
benefit of doing things this way is that, well, one, it takes a lot of work the first year, but then you have the screencast. And if you're mindful of not including specific dates and tied to a class, you can reuse it year to year. But also it's really helpful so that your students can get support from other people, whether they go to an after school tutoring program or their parents parents or a counselor or just anyone. I know I'm tutoring now, and sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, there are no directions from this
Yeah.
teacher. I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Kate has the same thing happen when she's helping her son with his homework. So it is really kind of a nice way to let other people be able to help.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or somebody who is absent
Yeah.
or, if you're working with a PLC, you split up those screencasts, and then that benefit is twofold. One, you're not doing all the screencasts, you're sharing it, but then also they're benefiting from hearing other voices. Everybody, even though we're doing the same thing in our screencasts, we explain things in a slightly different way. And maybe one of my students is going to benefit from hearing the way Stephanie explains something, and hopefully vice versa. So it's always a benefit.
And it's a great equalizer to make sure everyone in that PLC, all students are hearing the same thing, they're getting the same directions. And so if that's something that you want to move toward, that's a really helpful tool as well.
Yeah. It's a great equalizer.
So the kind of fun way we stick with this workshop idea is that we would often we started doing this a little bit before we completely switched to no homework. But what we started doing was when we gave students work time, we would call it Starbucks mode. And we found some playlists that were all instrumental, calming.
It really does need to be instrumental.
It does. And I also learned we found a bunch of cool playlists that have like pop music set to classical. That can even get really distracting for students, especially if they know the song. And so really kind of those.
I'd always determine like, what level of attention do I need? If it's those participation weekly assignments, you can take that instrumental pop song.
Or I think her husband made a playlist that had words in it because the kids were like, we want words, but we still want it to be distracting. They're not distracting. So, and so we would just tell students, during that time, if you would like to listen to music in your own earbuds, you may, but they're your earbuds. You're not sharing it with the class. It should be instrumental, not loud rap lyrics, that sort of thing.
Any lyrics. We're not discriminating. Any lyrics. It could be the nicest lyrics in the world. It's distracting.
Yes. I say that because that's what they listened to, not because I have anything against rap. But it just was kind of like the idea of like, you're in a coffee shop and you're working by yourself and you do you. And like, what do you need to do to concentrate?
Yeah. You can find lots of different instrumental playlists on Spotify, on YouTube. If you are going to do YouTube, I would maybe consider investing in ad-free. I know for myself, I think I was more jarred by the students than when the ads would pop up. It would be like, you're interrupting my Starbucks mode. But just something to keep in mind if that's going to bother you. You might consider making that small investment.
And students came to like it. They would ask, are we in Starbucks mode now? Use my earbud, which kind of makes it a nice way to deal with the phone issue where you can be like, we're not in Starbucks mode, so put your phone away. Okay, now we're in Starbucks mode. You can have it.
Or take your earbuds out.
Yes.
Absolutely. Hopefully you have learned something or gotten a little nugget that you want to think about a little bit more. If you have any questions about what we've talked about here, or you have a question that we haven't addressed about how we avoid giving homework in our classes, feel free to drop a comment down below. Thank you so much for joining us. See you soon. Bye.